The first time I noticed the boy, I was 29 years old, standing alone in my parents' attic with a box of old photographs balanced on my knees, and I almost put the picture back without thinking about it. It was an ordinary photograph at first glance. My mother was sitting on the front steps of my grandparents' old house. My father stood behind her with one hand resting on her shoulder. My older sister Lily was holding a birthday cake, and I was standing beside her, missing one of my front teeth and smiling so hard my eyes were nearly closed. But there was someone else in the picture, a boy. He was standing slightly apart from everyone, close enough to be part of the family but far enough away to look like he wasn't supposed to be there. He was maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair, a narrow face, and the same small scar above his right eyebrow that my father had. What stopped me wasn't that I didn't recognize him. What stopped me was that I recognized him immediately. I had seen that face before. Not in our family albums, not in old school pictures, not anywhere I could explain, but somewhere in the strange half-memory of childhood. I stared at the photograph for almost a minute before turning it over. There was a date written on the back in my mother's handwriting, July 14th, 2001. Beneath it were 4 words, "Summer we became 5. I felt a chill run through me. There had always been 4 of us, my mother, my father, Lily, and me. 4. I carried the photograph downstairs and found my mother in the kitchen washing a coffee mug. I didn't say anything at first. I simply placed the photograph on the counter. She looked down, and the mug slipped from her hand. It hit the floor and shattered. My mother didn't even flinch. She just stared at the boy. Then she whispered, "Where did you find that?" I asked, "Who is he?" She looked at me, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw fear on my mother's face. Not surprise, not confusion, fear. She picked up the photograph with trembling fingers and turned it face down. "You shouldn't have seen this." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Mom, that's not an answer." She wouldn't look at me. "Put it back. Who is he, please? Is he family?" She finally raised her eyes to mine. "Don't ask me that." That was the moment I knew the photograph wasn't some forgotten mistake. It was a door, and my mother was terrified that I had just found the key. I wanted to push harder, but she walked out of the kitchen without another word. I stood there looking at the broken mug on the floor and the photograph in my hand, wondering how a single picture could make my entire childhood suddenly feel like a lie. My father had died 6 months earlier, and since his death, my mother had been sorting through his things slowly, almost painfully, as though every drawer contained another piece of grief. The attic had been the last place she wanted me to touch. She told me there were old tax papers, Christmas decorations, broken lamps, and boxes that hadn't been opened in years. She never told me there were photographs. After my mother's reaction, I went back upstairs. I found the box exactly where I'd left it, and began searching again. At first there were only ordinary family pictures, Lily losing a tooth, my father grilling in the backyard, my mother holding me at the beach, Christmas mornings, school plays, birthdays. Then I found another picture of the boy. This time he was sitting at the kitchen table with my father. My father was laughing, and the boy was looking at him with an expression I couldn't understand. Underneath the photograph, written in the same handwriting, were the words, "He asked if Dad would come back." I stared at the sentence until the letters seemed to blur. I found a third picture. The boy was standing beside my grandmother. A fourth showed him asleep on a couch. A fifth showed him sitting in the back seat of my father's car. In every picture he was there, but never in the center, never officially included, never named. It was as if someone had tried to preserve evidence of him while simultaneously erasing him. I counted 12 photographs before my hand started shaking. Then I noticed something even stranger. Every photograph had been taken between 2001 and 2002. After that, there were no more. The boy disappeared from the family albums completely. I brought the pictures to Lily that evening. She was 2 years older than me, and had always been the person I went to when something didn't make sense. We sat at her dining table, and I spread the photographs between us. She looked at the first one and frowned. "Who is that?" I said. "That's what I'm trying to find out." She picked up another picture. Her face changed. "Wait, you know him?" "No." She turned the photograph over. "I don't know him, but what?" She looked at me. "I remember this summer." My heart started beating faster. "What do you remember?" She rubbed her forehead. "Dad was gone a lot. Mom said he was helping Grandpa with something. That's not unusual." "No, but he was different when he came home." "Different how?" She stared at the photograph. "He looked guilty." That word stayed between us. Guilty. I asked if she remembered a boy. She shook her head. Then, after a long silence, she said something that made my stomach drop. "I remember Mom telling me not to talk about him." "What?" I was 10. I didn't understand. There was a boy staying at Grandma's house for a while. I thought he was a neighbor's kid. "You saw him?" "I think so." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I forgot." She said it quietly, almost apologetically. But I knew she hadn't completely forgotten. There was something buried in her memory, something she'd been trained not to touch. We called our mother. She didn't answer. We called again. Nothing. The next morning I found her sitting at the dining room table with an old envelope in front of her. She looked exhausted. "You found more pictures," she said. It wasn't a question. I sat across from her. Lily was beside me. "Mom, who was he?" She closed her eyes. "His name was Noah." The name hit me strangely, not because I remembered it, but because some part of me felt like I should. Who was Noah? My mother folded her hands together. "He was your father's son." The room went silent. Lily whispered, "What?" I couldn't speak. My mother looked at me. "Your father had a son before he met me." I shook my head. "Then why didn't we know?" "Because Noah's mother didn't want him around your father. But he was in our house. For a short time." "Why?" My mother looked down at the envelope. "Because she died." That was the first version of the truth. It was devastating, but it still didn't explain the photographs. If Noah was my father's son, why had he been hidden? Why had my father never told us? Why had my mother written "Summer we became 5, and why had Noah disappeared? My mother refused to answer. She said the rest belonged to my father. "He left a letter," she said. "I found it after he died." She slid the envelope toward me. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. My fingers froze before I opened it. Inside was one page. "If you're reading this, then your mother finally decided you were old enough to know about Noah." I looked at my mother. She began crying silently. I continued. "I need you to understand something before you judge me. I did not abandon my son. I believed I was protecting him." The rest of the letter was missing. The bottom half had been torn away. "Where's the rest?" I asked. My mother shook her head. "I burned it." "Why?" "Because I couldn't live with what it said." That answer only made things worse. I spent the next 3 days searching for Noah. I searched old school records, family contacts, social media, anything I could find. There were hundreds of Noahs. None were him. Then I remembered the scar above his eyebrow. I searched old photographs again and noticed something in the background of one image, a handwritten address on a moving box. It belonged to an apartment complex in another town. I drove there the following morning. The building was still standing, but the apartment had belonged to a woman named Claire Bennett. Claire was Noah's mother. The manager told me she had moved away years ago, but an elderly neighbor remembered her. "She had a little boy," the woman said. "Quiet kid. His father used to visit." "Do you remember his name?" I asked. She looked at me strangely. "Daniel." My heart stopped. "Daniel?" "Yes, Daniel." I thanked her and walked back to my car. My father was named Daniel. I suddenly understood why my mother had been so frightened, but there was still a missing piece. If my father was Noah's father, why had Claire taken him away? I found Claire's obituary online. She had died in 2003. Noah had been 8. The obituary mentioned no family except a brother named Marcus. I found Marcus through an old business directory. He lived 3 hours away. When I knocked on his door, he almost shut it in my face. Then I showed him the photograph. His expression changed immediately. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "My father." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. "You're Daniel's daughter." I nodded. He sighed and stepped aside. "Come in." What Marcus told me next changed the story completely. Claire had not died from illness, as my mother had claimed. She had died in a car accident. Noah had been in the car. He survived. Claire didn't. After the accident, Noah's grandparents took custody of him. My father had tried to get custody, but Claire's family refused. Marcus told me that my father had spent months fighting them. "He wanted his son," Marcus said. "So why didn't he take him?" I asked. Marcus looked away. "Because he thought Noah would be safer without him." "That doesn't make sense." "It will." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out an old folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them. My father's handwriting filled every page. Birthday wishes, Christmas messages, apologies, updates about our family, questions about school, notes about his own children, letters written to Noah that had never been delivered. "Your father sent these for years," Marcus said. "Your grandparents returned them. Why?" "Because they blamed Daniel for Claire's death." I stared at him. Was it his fault? Marcus didn't answer immediately. No. That one word carried more weight than anything else. Then why did everyone act like it was? Marcus looked at me. Because Claire had been planning to leave town with Noah. Daniel wanted to stop her from leaving. They argued. She drove away upset. The accident happened that night. I felt sick. My father hadn't caused the accident, but he had always believed his argument contributed to it. "That's why he stayed away," Marcus said. "He thought if Noah knew the truth, he'd hate him." I thought about the photographs. Then why was Noah with us in 2001? Marcus looked at me. "Because your father finally got one chance." He explained that Noah's grandparents had allowed a short visit. My father had brought him to our home. That summer, Noah spent several weeks with us. He met Lily. He met me. He ate at our table. He slept on our couch. He asked my father whether he could call him Dad, and my father said yes. That was the summer my mother wrote. Summer we became 5. I suddenly remembered something. I was 5 years old in one of those photographs. There was a boy in the kitchen who had given me a red toy truck. I remembered the truck. I remembered someone saying, "Don't worry, I'll bring it back tomorrow." But I had never remembered the boy. I asked Marcus where Noah was now. He hesitated. "He's alive." My heart jumped. "Where?" Marcus gave me an address. Noah was 33 now. He lived in a small town 4 hours away and worked as a high school counselor. I drove there the next morning. I almost turned around twice. I had spent my entire life believing my family was 4 people. Suddenly I was about to meet the 5th. When I arrived at the school, I saw him through the office window. He was taller than the boy in the photographs, of course. His hair was darker, his face older, but the scar was still there, above his right eyebrow. I stood outside for several minutes before walking in. "Are you Noah?" I asked. He looked up. "Yes," I swallowed. "My name is Emma." His face changed. "Emma?" I nodded. He stared at me as if I had stepped out of a photograph. "You were the little girl with the missing tooth." I laughed through tears. "You remember me?" He smiled faintly. "I remember everything." We sat in a quiet cafe later that afternoon. I showed him the photographs. He touched one with his fingertips. "I thought these were gone." "You knew they existed. Your father gave me copies." I looked at him. "Why didn't you ever contact us?" He looked down at his coffee. "I tried once." "When?" "After Daniel died." I froze. "You knew he died?" "I always knew." "Then why didn't you come?" He took a breath. "Because your mother asked me not to." My chest tightened. "Why?" Noah reached into his bag and pulled out another envelope. It was old, yellowed, and sealed. My mother's handwriting was on the front. "She sent this to me 2 years after your father died," he said. "She told me that if I truly loved the family, I would stay away." I stared at the envelope. "What did you do?" "I stayed away." I felt anger rising inside me. She had no right. "Maybe." He looked at me. But I understood why she was afraid. Afraid of what? He was silent for a long time. "Your father had a heart condition." I already knew. He had died after years of heart problems. "What does that have to do with you?" Noah looked down. "Everything." He told me the part nobody had ever told me. After Claire's accident, my father had spent years blaming himself. When he finally got the chance to see Noah again, he made a promise. He would never force Noah to choose between his biological father and the grandparents who had raised him. He would be there quietly. He would pay for school. He would send letters. He would watch from a distance. But he would never demand anything. Then, in the final year of his life, my father had asked Noah to meet him privately. They had met at a park. My father told Noah about his heart condition and said he might not have much time left. Noah asked why he had never told us. My father said, "Because my children deserve to remember me as their father, not as the man who had another family hidden from them." Noah told him that wasn't fair. My father agreed, but he was afraid. Afraid of losing us. Afraid of hurting my mother. Afraid that the truth would destroy the fragile peace he'd built. "And then?" I asked. Noah looked at me. He gave me something. It was a small wooden box. Inside was the red toy truck from my childhood, the same toy I remembered. My father had kept it for more than 20 years. Noah pushed it across the table toward me. "He said it belonged to you." I touched the worn plastic wheels. Suddenly I remembered the summer of 2001 more clearly than I had in years. Noah had given me that truck. I had cried when he left because I thought he was going home the next day. My father had promised he'd come back. He never did. Not because he didn't want to, because everyone had decided silence was safer. I returned home that night and confronted my mother. I placed the photograph and the toy truck on the table. "You lied to me." She didn't defend herself. "I know." "Why?" she cried before answering. "Because I was jealous. I wasn't expecting that." "Of Noah?" "Of the part of your father that belonged to someone else." She admitted that after Noah left, she couldn't stand seeing the photographs. She couldn't stand knowing her husband had a child before her. She convinced herself that erasing Noah would protect our family. But years passed, and the lie became too large to undo. When my father got sick, she begged him not to tell us. "He wanted to," she said. I stopped him. "Why?" "Because I thought if you knew, you'd look at him differently." I stared at her. "I would have looked at him as my brother." She broke down completely. "I know that now." For the first time I understood that my mother hadn't hidden Noah because she hated him. She had hidden him because she was terrified of losing what she had. But fear doesn't become harmless just because you understand where it came from. I told her I needed time. Then I went back to Noah. We met again at the same cafe. I gave him one of the photographs. "You should have this," I said. He smiled. "No, you keep it." "Why?" Because you spent 20 years thinking your family was missing someone. Maybe now you can stop looking. I looked at the photograph one more time. There we were. My father, my mother, Lily, me, and Noah. 5 people on a summer afternoon, frozen in time before any of us understood how complicated love could become. Noah and I didn't suddenly become inseparable. There was no magical moment where 20 years disappeared. We had missed birthdays, holidays, ordinary mornings, arguments, inside jokes, and countless small moments siblings are supposed to share. You can't recover those years, but we could build new ones. A month later, Noah came to my mother's house for dinner. My mother opened the door and couldn't speak. Noah simply said, "Hi, Mom." She began crying. He hugged her anyway. Lily joined them. I stood back and watched, realizing that the family in the photograph had never really disappeared. We had simply spent years refusing to name it. Before dinner, Noah asked if I still had the photograph from the attic. I told him yes. He smiled. "Good. Why?" I asked. He looked at me and said, "Because now, when someone asks who that boy was, you won't have to say you don't know. I keep that photograph in a frame now, not because it proves my family lied to me, but because it reminds me that people can spend years trying to protect each other with silence and accidentally create wounds far deeper than the truth ever would have caused. My father wasn't perfect. My mother wasn't either. Noah didn't get the childhood he deserved, and neither did the rest of us, because adults sometimes make decisions for children based on fears those children never agreed to carry. But I learned something I wish my family had understood sooner. Secrets don't disappear when you hide them. They simply wait for someone brave enough to ask the question everyone else is afraid to answer, and sometimes the person missing from the family picture isn't really missing at all. They're just standing at the edge, waiting for someone to finally say, "You belong here." If you were in my place, would you have forgiven my mother for keeping Noah a secret for all those years, or would some betrayals be too big to forgive? Let me know what you would have done, because I think everyone sees family secrets differently. And if this story made you look at the people in your own life a little differently, leave a like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next story, because sometimes the truth isn't hidden in the places we never looked, it's hidden in the photographs we've been looking at our entire lives.